Alrighty, welcome everyone, and my name's Chris Russo. I'm the president of Texans for Strong Borders. Wanted to do a live stream today, just really quickly, just getting this whole live stream thing started, so bear with me. Wanted to go over some of the issues that we've been tackling this week. Namely, we released a press release on the sunset of Title 42, which is, of course, the public health ordinance under which you have the majority of the removals of people that are illegally crossing the southern border. And then also to talk about some comments that Senator John Cornyn of Texas made regarding groups like ours and other policy experts and politicians' language around what's happening at our southern border. So hope everyone's doing well. Hope everyone's had a good Friday. It's kind of a casual Friday for us over here at Texans for Strong Borders. So if you guys have any questions or comments, always feel free to hit us up in the chat or to talk to us on Twitter or Instagram or Facebook. Again, our handle on all three is @StrongBordersTX. So, you guys, as we get into the legislative session coming up in January, there are going to be a lot of issues for us to tackle. So even though I'm streaming on Friday today, I'm going to try to be more consistent, and I think I'm going to try to do a show on Thursday afternoons, kind of talking about what's going to come up in the given week and what's happened in immigration and border security news. So please be sure to tune in. And we're going to try and make this operation a little bit more sophisticated as we go forward. So let's go ahead and get into our first topic for the evening or the afternoon, which is going to be the expiration of Title 42 removals. So, of course, yesterday we released a press release about the effect that Title 42 is going to have as we move away from those types of removals being the main tool that we have to remove illegal aliens from the country. So basically, here's the background. Title 42 is a public health ordinance, and it was enacted in 2020 during the COVID-19 pandemic as a way for the Trump administration to ensure that people that were crossing the border who were in coronavirus impacted areas, which of course was basically the entire globe in 2020, can be removed without processing them through the legal immigration system or the federal immigration system in general. So this was pretty much all of the people that were apprehended crossing the border in 2020 and towards the tail end of 2020, once this policy was implemented, and then through most of 2021. Once this was implemented in 2020, this was basically the vast majority of the people that would come to the southern border or be apprehended crossing the southern border. They were immediately removed under Title 42. Once you saw the border crisis really start after Joe Biden was inaugurated in January of 2021, you saw that the amount of Title 42 expulsions stayed approximately the same, while the number of people that were processed through the federal immigration system got up to that level over the next several months, and then even started to exceed that level. And now there was a ruling on, I believe it was November the 15th, out of the District Court of the District of Columbia. It's presided over by Emmett G. Sullivan, who is a Clinton-appointed judge. Long history of these pretty left-wing judicial records. Famously, he threatened to hold former U.S. Attorney General Jeff Sessions in contempt of court for deporting illegal aliens. So basically, what's going to happen is that this was struck down by the D.C. District Court and Judge Sullivan, and it was struck down on the basis of being arbitrary and capricious. So what Judge Sullivan said is that, well, you've enacted this this health regulation that gives you these wide-ranging powers, but I deem that you had no real compelling interest in exercising these powers. They were exercised only arbitrarily. And so what you had was basically, he said, okay, this Title 42 program of expulsions for COVID-19 is arbitrary and capricious, so now it's going to go away. And it was such a shock to the federal government that this happened that they actually asked and were granted a temporary period of transition for them to be able to prepare for the impact. So even though this ruling was on November 15th, they said that these Title 42 expulsions are no longer enforceable. They gave the government until December the 21st, which is next Wednesday, to basically prepare for the end of the program and sunset it. So basically what we see happening is that, okay, so all of these public health ordinances and public health advisories are going to be used, but only where it's convenient for left-wing politicians and judges. So, a public health ordinance is going to be upheld in some cases, but it's going to be struck down in the case of, the only tool that we have because the Biden administration isn't doing its job in deporting illegal aliens. So basically what I said in my statement in the press conference is that it's reprehensible that an activist judge is forcing the federal government to stop enforcing Title 42 while other pandemic measures remain in place throughout the country. Title 42 removals were the last effective tool that U.S. Customs and Border Protection had to remove illegal aliens from the country. Without it, roughly double the number of illegal aliens will be released into the interior of the country, and this number will only increase as the narco-terrorist cartels and their NGO allies spread the word amongst would-be illegal border crossers. The open borders radicals in the Biden administration continue to abuse prosecutorial discretion and parole authority while ignoring the suffering of American citizens and human trafficking victims. So basically what's going to happen is that right now Title 42 expulsions comprise approximately 40, a little less than half of the number of people coming into the country that are apprehended. And that is swiftly going down to zero. And as of December 21st, there will be no Title 42 removals. And so that means that basically everyone who is apprehended by law enforcement, whether it's by, Operation Lone Star, and then they turn them over to customs officers, or directly by Customs and Border Protection, whenever they're going to be apprehended, they will then go into the federal immigration system, which the Department of Justice has abused and weaponized through these illegal parole programs and extreme abuse of prosecutorial discretion to basically exclude these gigantic categories of illegal aliens from any sort of legal action or prosecution. They've argued that they have virtually limitless authority to not enforce whatever law that they want for virtually any sort of reason, when in in fact, all of these exceptions to prosecution are supposed to be on a case-by-case basis. And this has been going on since the Biden administration came into power in January of 2021, and it continues to go on. And what happened was that the only way that, or virtually the only way that people were being deported, well, once they were apprehended, other than them having like a serious criminal offense committed after they had already crossed, besides entering the country illegally. Title 42 was basically the main way that people were being expelled from the country, because it didn't have to go through all of the lawfare, all of the illegal prosecutorial discretion, etc., that was being done by the Biden administration, by the Department of Justice. And so with Title 42 going away, you're going to see at least double the amount of illegal aliens and people crossing the border be released into the interior of the country. And in fact, it's probably going to be much more than that, because one of the things that you'll see is that the incentive structure is been completely altered. The scenario that a person who might want to come into the United States illegally would have is the game's changed by the removal of Title 42. So before, you had basically a 50-50 shot of either being removed via Title 42 or being let into the interior of the country. Now that that's going away, the overwhelming probability is that regardless of your legal status and your justification for being in the United States, you're going to be able to remain here because of these legal abuses under the Biden administration. And so what we've seen already is that the number of crossings has increased by up to 150% in some regions, and that now DHS is publicly omitting, or a source in DHS, I think, told a reporter that they expected between 9,000 and 15,000 per day, and DHS Secretary Mayorkas, he actually overshot that figure and said that it would be up to 18,000 per day. So think about that, 18,000 per day. 18,000 per day. That's like a small town coming across the border into the United States every single day. And the vast, vast majority of those people are not going to be deported. They're going to be, they're not even going to be detained, because there won't be enough space to detain them. And so what's going to happen is they're going to be given a name, a number, and a court date if they're not pre-paroled, and they're going to be released into the interior of the country. And that's going to happen every single day until something is done about this. And so you can see that in the case, one of the lawyers for one of these pro-immigrant NGOs said that the most effective wall was Title 42. And he said that basically, like, any physical barriers paled in comparison to the difference in enforcement that was carried out by the Title 42 policy. And it illustrates that the main reason that they were opposed to Title 42 was not on these spurious legal grounds. It was because Title 42 worked. It allowed Customs and Border Protection to actually get people out of the country once they had entered illegally. So moving on. So I said here that DHS, it was the Secretary Mayorkas, anticipates as many as 18,000 crossings every single day. But I said all hope is not lost. A lot of people, unfortunately, are under the impression that because immigration and border security are supposed to be primarily issues that are undertaken by the federal government, that because the federal government is controlled by, an administration that is at worst derelict of duty, and what I believe is that they are intentionally undermining the sovereignty and the enforcement of laws on the books of the United States, that if they aren't willing to do anything, there's just nothing we can do. We've got to wait until 2024 when we can vote Biden out of office, and then we can, lobby our Republican politicians to maybe finally do something. That's not the case. Now, something that Texans for Strong Borders and also some other organizations like Center for Renewing America have laid out is a plan under which governors can use the U.S. Constitution to declare an invasion under Article 1, Section 10, Clause 3, which is called the Self-Defense Clause, and then directly repel and intercept those attempting to cross. And this would be, again, like Title 42, it would go around federal immigration law that's so mobbed up with these activist judges. You've got all of these NGOs and immigration lawyers and these histories of legal settlements between the government and these groups that have resulted in basically a lack of enforcement of the laws that are on the books. You've got these illegal categorical parole programs, and all these things like this. And so what we are saying is that state governors, especially in border states, have got to use this authority that's afforded to them in Article 1, Section 10 to secure the border, because the federal government's just not going to do it. And the consequences of waiting on the federal government to do it are just way too high to wait for the next election. I mean, we're talking about, so far, this is with Title 42, you've had between 5 and 6 million encounters by federal authorities of people crossing the border illegally. That's just encounters. And those are not the number of people that were returned or deported. So if you say 40% of those people thus far were expelled under Title 42, and then you say, well, how many people do we not know about? Because those numbers are not reflective of the number of people that got away and were not apprehended. And it doesn't count the number of people that we never even detected crossing the border. So if you look at those numbers, we could be looking at 12 million people, maybe even more after the repeal or after the striking down of Title 42. 12 million people entering the country illegally in just the 4 years of the Biden administration. That is not acceptable. That would bring the number of people residing in the United States illegally to almost 10% of the total nominal population. That's a huge, huge impact on the life of the country. You talk about the crime that's committed, the cost to taxpayers, the drug smuggling operations, the fact that a lot of these people who are coming over, even though they're coming, the vast majority are coming over voluntarily, increasingly they're on payment plans or bribery plans or forced labor agreements with these cartels. And so they're basically operating outside of the bounds of law enforcement within the United States. And so we don't see this as an acceptable solution. So we think that this case about Title 42 should be appealed, and I know that there's some efforts going on to reinstate it. Even Democratic governors have called upon it to be reinstated for the moment because of the impacts that they know it's going to have on their states. But even if it is going to be struck down and remain struck down, we're not without hope. the governor of the state of Texas and the governor of other states could declare an invasion, which it is, and I'll get to this in a second. They can declare an invasion. They can go into an interstate compact with other states with Republican governors to share resources and technology and funding and things like that. And so they can try to combat this invasion directly. So we released a press release on this. We anticipate that it's going to get bad. I mean, I think most of you have seen the scenes from around El Paso, so we can look up. One of the best sources of this footage is Bill Malugin from Fox News. So you can see the midnight caravan of people that were crossing illegally into El Paso on December the 12th. And you can see the scene where it's just, over 1,000 people are coming in. And this is just at a time. This is in one crossing. This isn't every day. We're talking about 18 of these happening every single day with no end in sight. That's transformative. The crisis at the border has been bad. It's been really bad since the beginning of the Biden administration, but we've never seen anything like this before. And it's only going to get worse. If you remember, during the Trump administration, people would freak out about these caravans of like 2,000 people that would be working their way up from Honduras, and we'd get updates on I think the group was called Pueblos Sin Fronteras, so people without borders, and they would just send these groups of 2,000, 3,000 people north, and we'd get these frantic updates from the commentariat from conservatives and on Fox News about 2,000 people that would take weeks to reach the United States border. And now what we're seeing is a group of 1,000 people like this. 18 of those are going to be crossing every single day. That's the level of crisis that we're at. What was thought to be unthinkable and outrageous during the Trump administration is now happening, nine times every day. And this is before the formal repeal. And so what we're seeing now, these scenes that we have of these buses that are being escorted by Mexican police. Now these NGOs are working with the Mexican authorities to say, okay, well, Mexico's not going to enforce its immigration law. So instead of the Remain in Mexico policy we had under Trump, we're going to use Mexican police escorts to let NGOs ferry people through Mexican territory right to the United States border. And these people are coming over in these waves of just thousands and thousands of people, and there's really no end in sight. As soon as these people get word that Title 42 is over, this is going to get worse and worse and worse. And you can see the reports. I mean, what is it? 230,000 pills of fentanyl that were seized. And, that begs the question, how much of this is getting across that's not even seized? In 2021, we had 71,000 fentanyl-related deaths in the United States, and much of that is coming across our southern border. And so you can imagine what the impact's going to be once we get the numbers for 2022 and then 2023 and going forward as we enter into the new year. The situation is just completely unmanageable. We've got Bill Malugin reporting that border crossings are up 56% from this time last year, and last year was the all-time record. And this is before Title 42 is struck down and ends. And so the floodgates that we're seeing are just a taste of what we can expect to see going into the new year. And we see that these border towns have already been overrun. They're already calling upon the federal government to do more, and now we're going to ratchet that up to, two times or three times what we've seen in the past. And this is just the beginning. If nothing's done, then everyone's going to realize that it's open season on the border, and that you've really got no recourse for people to get any relief from this, and there's no consequences for crossing the border except for positive ones. And so why wouldn't you try to do it? And then that's going to put more money into the pockets of these narco-terrorist cartels that are enacting all of these terrible crimes to people on both sides of the border and engaging in human trafficking and things like this. And so the big thing is, not only are the immediate effects of this going to be felt, but you're going to feel these effects for decades to come if nothing is done. It's going to be decades. I mean, if you think about it, what happens when you have, over the course of 4 years, you have 12 million people coming into the United States and staying in the United States? 12 million. And then those people have children that attend public schools, and those children, they are full U.S. citizens with all of the rights and privileges that U.S. citizens get, and their origin story and their sense of what the American dream is not 1776. It's the Biden administration making the United States into an economic zone rather than a country. And this is really, it's an undermining of who is here, who's making the decisions in our elections, who's determining what the fabric of our culture is going to be, who are stakeholders in the American dream and in the American nation going forward. And so you can see it's just a really dire situation right here that's going to get worse. And in the midst of this, Republican politicians just can't be bothered to do their jobs, and it's really sickening. So one thing that we saw, and let me change the window really quickly here. Just a second. Here we go. So one thing that we saw is that in an interview with reporter Julian Aguilar, he said that around the language around this crisis, he said that I would prefer to call it a humanitarian public safety and public health crisis. I think the word invasion brings up some other connotations that I don't think apply here. So, of course, the obvious thing is that we've got all of these people that are used to us being so soft on immigration that and so legalistic with the way that we approach this, that we would not characterize what's going on as an invasion. Because, a lot of people that I've talked to about the whole Article 1, Section 10 issue, and they were mostly people that are soft on immigration Republicans to begin with. They're saying, oh, well, what Russia's doing to Ukraine's an invasion. What's happening on our southern border is an invasion. Well, the problem with that is that the people that wrote the Constitution actually used a much broader definition of invasion at the time than, a specific formal military operation by a foreign nation state. What's happening here is non-government entities, so NGOs and the cartels are colluding together. They're organizing. They've got a system. They advertise. They take the money of people who want to come across the border. They tell them what their legal recourse is once they cross and are apprehended. They instruct these people exactly what to do. You have people in the cartels that are taking personally identifiable information from these people that are crossing so that they can know who to go to if they're late on their payments, if they're on a payment plan. They have wristbands that they're seen crossing with to make sure that they know that, you know, they're in this group from this country. They paid this much. They're with this cartel. And so it's obvious that this is an organized effort. And so James Madison, on the question of what an actual invasion means, he said at the Virginia ratifying convention for the Constitution, he said that that language could be applied to suppressing smugglers. And so what is happening at the border, the most common thing is human smuggling and drug smuggling. And that's the moneymaker for these cartels, is human smuggling, to a lesser extent human trafficking. But some of this human smuggling, it begins as a human smuggling operation, and it quickly becomes human trafficking because of the payment plans that people are on. There's forced labor. They change the terms of the agreement in the middle of the journey, where, you know, you're told you owe this much, and then you're, you know, told halfway through, well, actually, we're going to take this much from you, and you have to work for us, and if you don't make your payments, then we're going after your family. But anyway, what's happening is drug smuggling, human trafficking. And so by this specific example alone, it should illustrate that it isn't just formal military operations by recognized states. It's a much broader definition of invasion. And if you guys want to look more into this, this invasion question, there's a legal opinion by Arizona Attorney General Mark Brnovich, and I'll bring that over now, actually. And so let's change this window over really quickly. Here we go. Okay, so Arizona Attorney General Mark Brnovich issued an opinion in February of this year, basically going over this approach, Article 1, Section 10, the state self-defense clause. What is an actual invasion? And he goes through this whole invasion question. So I'll go ahead and throw this opinion link in chat so that you guys can take a look at it, or you can probably even see it if you're on the replay. Excuse me one second. And he talks about how the contemporaries at the time, sorry, just one second. Okay, yeah, the contemporaries at the time of the passage of the Constitution, those people that were arguing for and against the ratification of the Constitution, the people that wrote it, they definitely did not regard this invasion with this maximally restrictive type conception like Senator Cornyn is implying here. And so, obviously, we can say, like, what is going on is an invasion. And that means that the powers that are afforded to state governments in the case of an actual invasion can be applied here. So I'm going to go back to the letter. Okay, here we go. So what you've seen is that Republicans that are soft on immigration, they'll try to hide behind this conception of like, oh, it's not really an invasion. But really what they're after is they don't really care about the border issue. Their donors are addicted to cheap labor in most cases, or they're under the false impression that being soft on illegal immigration is the way that they try to win over more Hispanic voters in like the most naked pandering that you could imagine. And so what I said is that the illegal border crossings that are happening are not simply stochastic. That is, they're not just, there is economic inequality, and so people are always going to want to come from a poor country into a rich country to seek economic opportunity. It's not just a natural process or a social process. What's happening is it's well-funded and well-organized. And that while we're busy word policing or tone policing, that there are millions of illegal aliens that have been released into the interior of the country, and there will be more. And this puts Texans and Americans in real danger. We talked about the 71,000 fentanyl deaths in the year 2021. Much of that came through the southern border. You've got crime that's being committed. We highlight all the time the crimes that are completely preventable had we just enforced our immigration law and secured our border. And also the fact that this undermines U.S. sovereignty. So while the Biden administration ignores its constitutional duties, snubs its nose at its voters, and undermines U.S. immigration law, the states have to do something. And this invasion clause is both legally applicable, it has plenty of support, and it could be efficacious for those trying to seek a solution to the border crisis rather than just trying to score political points by pretending to do something in the midst of it. And so what I asked Senator Cornyn is, I said, instead of supporting these actions, you continue to wring your hands and insist on softening of language in the name of political correctness. We urge you to reverse course, to champion federal and state measures to repel this invasion at the Texas border, and live up to the expectations of your constituents. We talk all the time when I go and talk to various groups around the state, various grassroots groups. I talk about how every single Republican politician has on their website, they have a border security tab on their issues page, and they talk about how tough they're going to be on the border. You know, I'm going to secure the border, and I'm going to work with law enforcement, and I'm going to close legal loopholes. And when push comes to shove, they can't even call a spade a spade. They can't even say, you know, oh, you know how we have all these NGOs that are funded by the U.S. government and both directly and indirectly by the UN, and we have all of these cartels. The Sinaloa and Gulf cartel are literally like have a system by which they collect payment. They collect personally identifiable information from these people. They have color-coded wristbands, and they have a time and a place based on country of origin. They have a price based on country of origin for people to be smuggled across into the United States. But yeah, no, it's not an invasion. It's just a humanitarian public safety and public health crisis. You know, you couldn't come up with a more focus group tested, banal description in a laboratory on K Street than what's going on right now with that sort of language. It's frankly just, it's part of the do nothing posture that the Republican Party establishment and John Cornyn in particular have had about the immigration issue for years. And I mean, we have to push on this. So we released this open record. I email him, or sorry, this open letter. I emailed him this letter. I mailed him a physical copy of this letter, and I would urge you to try and join in this call as citizens that are concerned about our border security. I would urge you guys to call Senator Cornyn's office and tell him, hey, we need solutions. This is a real invasion. You should be talking about how this is an invasion and the states can step in. Join us. Propose legislation to fix this, even if you think it's going to die because you don't have a majority in the U.S. Senate. Make Democrats go on the record and say, we're not going to solve this problem. And so I'd encourage you guys to look into the invasion issue and to call your politicians, call your representatives, and ask them to do something about this. So, again, we've got Title 42 that's going to go away next Wednesday. And then we've got the solution to Title 42, which is going away, and really any lack of border security by the feds. And that is declaring an invasion, not going through the federal immigration system at all, because it need not be, we need not rely on them. And so for some of you guys on the invasion question, you might have seen that Greg Abbott has actually said, hey, I am declaring an invasion. I'm citing Article 1, Section 10, Clause 3. And so don't worry. We're deploying gunboats and we're going to finish the wall, and we're going to deploy the National Guard, and we're going to apprehend illegal aliens trying to cross. The problem is that what he said, and we've released this in a previous press release, is that he's returning these guys to the border. And when he returns them to the border, he brings them to a port of entry where they will be turned over to customs officers, so usually CBP. And then what's going to happen? They're going to be processed. They're going to be released into the interior of the country. And so really all that's happening is like this legal whitewashing of the invasion that's going on. And that's why Operation Lone Star has really not been that effective at stemming the tide in terms of border crossings being prevented or people crossing the border and then eventually making it into the interior of the country. So again, guys, thanks for following this issue. Thanks for your interest in the immigration issue in general. I'd encourage you to remain vigilant as we go into the next session. We at Texans for Strong Borders will be providing you with updates on the legislation that we're interested in seeing, that we're interested in, and give you guys ways to engage with your politicians in a meaningful way to try and encourage them to either co-sponsor or write legislation, or to vote legislation up or down once it gets onto the floor. So again, guys, I'm going to try and do a live stream every Thursday. I know it's Friday, but I'm going to try and do it every Thursday from now on, and try and do at least a couple of minutes to do some commentary. And so, guys, thanks for joining, and I hope you guys have a great Friday evening and a great weekend. We'll see you next time.